Geliyor mu şu an? Tamam, süper. Dediğim gibi ben çok fazla sözü uzatmak istemiyorum. Birazcık bu AI, MCP'den çok az bir giriş yapıp sonra sözü ben çok değerli misafirlerimize, konuşmacılara bırakmak istiyorum. Biliyorsunuz AI şu an bizim için yükselen bir değer. Teknolojik olarak ilk anlamda da yazılım dünyasında bizleri etkiliyor. Birazcık AI'ye, yapay zekaya artık böyle yeni çıkan bizim ilgilendiğimiz hobi olarak bizim dikkatimizi çeken bir tool olmaktan çıkıyor. Aslında 90'lardaki internetin yaygınlaşması, yazılım dünyasını etkilemesi gibi bir devrim haline geliyor. Bu devrimde tabii bir devrim olduğunda da elemeler birlikte geliyor. Bu tabii AI'nin bizi nasıl etkilediğini de belirliyor. Bu devrimlerde bizim AI artık dediğim gibi bizim sadece böyle bir yapay zeka denemeleri olmaktan çıkıp aslında iş süreçlerimizi etkileyen, yaptığımız işleri etkileyen bir tool haline geliyor. Çok önemli bir tool haline geliyor. Tabii şimdi en önemli soru da şey haline geliyor. AI bizi işimizden edecek mi? Aslında bizim inancımız, hatta Teknasyon'da da biz bunu birkaç yerde hep beraber konuştuk. AI direkt bizim işimizi bizi işimizden etmeyecek ama AI'yı kendi iş akışlarına, kendi iş süreçlerinin içerisine entegre etmeyen, kullanmayan şirketler, kişiler yavaş yavaş bu işte eğlenmeye başlayacaklar. Yani cevabı birazcık AI direkt bizi işimizden etmeyecek ama AI'yi çok iyi kullanıp süreçlerinde, yaptığı işlerde AI'yi merkeze oturtan şirketler, kişiler yavaş yavaş bizleri işlerimizden edecek veya pazar paylarını kazanmaya başlayacaklar. Bu açıdan çok önemli görüyoruz. Buna çok dikkat ediyoruz. Bunu da hem kendi kişisel hayatımızda hem şirkette uygulamaya çalışıyoruz. Birazcık belki bunu hatırlatmak istedim. Tabii AI bu kadar değerli olunca çeşitli teknolojiler, tool'lar bunlarla birlikte geliyor. Bugünkü özel meetup'ımızın konusu MCP. MCP'de aslında temelde ne sağlıyor? AI çok önemli dedik. Modeller siz de takip ediyorsunuz. Birçok modeller, birçok tool'lar çıkıyor. Bunlar konuşan tool'lar haline geliyor. Bizim konuştuğumuz tool'lar. İşte MCP sayesinde belki şu an sizin de bilginiz vardır, Google'un A2A başka protokoller sayesinde aslında modeller sadece konuştuğumuz tool'lar olmaktan çıkıp eylem yapan, bizim için aksiyon alan tool'lar haline geliyor. Bu da çok önemli kapılar açıyor düşündüğünüzde. Yani modeller artık bizim sadece soru sorduğumuz, yaptığımız değil, iş süreçlerimize entegre edebildiğimiz, bizim adımıza çok hızlı aksiyonlar alabilen tool'lar haline geliyor. Bu da bu işin nasıl daha hızlanacağını, nasıl büyüyeceğini bize anlatıyor birazcık. O açıdan da çok önemli. Bunları öğrenmemiz, anlamamız, uygulamamız bizim için sadece örneğin son kullanıcıya bir ürün çıkarmamız açısından değil, kendi iş süreçlerimizde, kendi şirketlerimizde, kendi iş yapışlarımızda bunları kullanmamız, yaygınlaştırmamız çok önemli hale geliyor. Bizim de çok önem verdiğimiz, uygulamaya çalıştığımız bir alan. O yüzden umarım çok güzel, herkes için keyifli bir etkinlik olur. Ben tekrar geldiğiniz için, vakit ayırdığınız için teşekkür ediyorum. Ve sözü Türk Hava Yolları'ndan Ekrem Bey'e bırakmak istiyorum. Alkışlarınızla.
Teşekkürler. Şimdi sorayım, salonda Türkçe konuşmayan kaç kişi var? Süper. David için konuşmayı İngilizce yapmaya çalışacağım. Hem sizin için hem benim için bir challenge olacak. Şimdiden hepinize özür dilerim. So David, I cannot see you if you want. Presentation in English. So it will be my second English presentation. The first one was in London. It was a little bit tough because everyone speaking perfectly fine English. Expect some Indians, which we get a lot of courses in university. But speaking English in front of all of you guys and knowing that how we can like bully each other when we do something wrong, it's really it's a little tough. So if I can see my screen. Yes, you can see my screen too. So I'm here to tell you how we built Turkish Airlines MCP and how we were the first airline that released their MCP and how we built basically that MCP. So before that, a small advertisement. We are one of the biggest airlines in the world. You obviously know that. So we have more than 500 airplanes, and right now we are expanding it to 800. And we travel more than 350 destinations all over the world. So we are, the biggest airline in the industry. And we carry more than 90 million passengers annually. So it is a huge number. And behind that Turkish Airlines, the core of innovation and how we build technology is Turkish technology, which was founded around 4 years ago. So Turkish technology not only serves Turkish Airlines, but serves all of the airline industry. If you are from one of those industries, you probably know Lufthansa systems. So they basically do a lot of the airline industry software. And we aim to be one of those providers, not only for Turkish Airlines, but the whole industry, and hopefully be one of those industry leaders. So Digital Lab, my team is behind that innovation. So being an enterprise and innovating in an enterprise is really tough, but our Digital Lab is working as a startup inside an enterprise. So we are constantly trying new ways of doing business, whether we can, how we can use technology. We are a tech-driven team. So whenever there's a new technology, our team just tries to do new things, and we obviously know how we can solve. We obviously know the pain points of the airline industry, and we try to address them using those. One of those examples is Turkish Airlines MCP. So I believe around February, we were thinking if we can build an MCP, and we weren't very sure if that can be a thing, because at that time the MCPs was around GitHub and some developer tools. But we were thinking, what if we can use that MCP for exposing our APIs? Because if you know MCP, and obviously you know that what MCP is and why we should be excited about it. So we thought that, that would be the next big thing. And we obviously do a lot of different things around that, but right now our main focus is MCPs, and right now we truly believe that chat is the new UI. So right now as Turkish Airlines, we have two main channels, one is web and one is mobile. But we see a trend where this goes beyond our applications and to chat applications. Right now, people tend to get inspiration from ChatGPT. Most of us probably use ChatGPT or any other AI tool to inspire where should I go next. And one of the questions often asked to those platforms are, what is the cheapest flight? When is the next flight? How we can do a round trip? What would be the required budget and so on? So this example, I'm not sure if you are reading it, but this is me trying our MCP. I was in abroad, and my mother-in-law was at our home, and she needed to go to the airport, but babysitter was coming at 9. So I needed to find a suitable flight for her to take to the Konya. So instead of entering our website and filling all those information, I just asked Claudia. By that time, Claudia was the only tool that we were, only the mainstream tool that we can use to consume our MCP, but today it is much different, and I will mention about it. So instead of me thinking what is the best flight, when we live in Üsküdar, and when she needs to go to the airport, what should be the connection time and so on, our MCP cleverly searched flights for today, offered a flight that is 1 hour later than the first flight, but it was 500 liras cheaper. So instead of paying 500 more, it cleverly picked 1 hour later flight so that she can catch that flight easier. And after that, using our MCP, we can create a booking link that you can directly book through our website. In the short term, hopefully in 2026, by the next year, we are also working how we can book a flight from start to the end through MCP. Can I get a water from? Yeah, thanks. Sorry. So with our MCP, since we are authenticating through our Smiles is our frequent flyer program. So since we are authenticating through Smiles, you don't need to remember, if you have a booking with us, you don't need to remember your PNR number. So in that case, can you check if I can check in for my next flight? Because as airlines, we sometimes do overbooked flights. So I recommend everyone to check in when check-in opens so that you don't have a surprise when you go to the airport. So it can cleverly fetch my flight information, get the check-in information and retrieve those. So you probably, as you know, we are live and you can try it out with the supporting LLMs. I will not do a demo, but we can do if you like. So what are the features that we support right now? So most of the tools that we, do you need the QR? No? Okay. So most of the features that we support with our MCP are read-only tools, and I will mention why we choose that path. So you can search flights, you can check the flight status both by route and phone number. You can check your booking details, you can get promotions, get city guides and so on. And since we are authenticating through Smiles, you can get your member profile and you can ask questions like how many miles I'm losing this year so that I can keep my status. So as I mentioned, building an MCP in an enterprise world came with challenges. And one of the challenges and one of the most critical challenges we faced, and probably you will face in enterprise setup, is security and governance, because securing an MCP is not known internally. So instead of opening a new thing to the adding a new challenge to our security teams, we used our existing mobile application APIs. So if anyone here trying to understand what we can do, I spoke with a MCP lead from Lufthansa today, and they were thinking how we can start. So my obvious answer would be start with a small thing, choose read-only APIs if you have one. So we used all of the tools that we expose right now are read-only tools, so that we don't do any weird stuff. We don't cancel your booking tickets accidentally and so on. And since we are authenticating to all of our APIs, we had an option to rate limit by your frequent flyer ID. So we have like hard limits that you can call how many tools, how many APIs per day. And we used OAuth 2.1. It was one of those big challenges. It is changing rapidly with the latest introduction, with the latest changes to the MCP spec, but I'm pretty sure David will mention those, and so I'm skipping those. So OAuth 2.1 is a relatively new standard to the OAuth specification, and you need to have dynamic client IDs and so on. So instead of we waiting a couple of months for our enterprise authentication system to support that authentication. It's back. So instead of waiting a couple of months, we integrated our OAuth, we implemented our OAuth 2.1 specification using the existing APIs, existing mobile APIs. So for those three, we came across with Cloudflare's example SDK, example repositories that really helped us along the way. So if you are thinking about governance, rate limiting, OAuth 2.1, I definitely recommend checking out Cloudflare docs, although I'm looking to the AWS guys, so I'm not talking with them. So, but I know they have a good business with them, so I'm just kidding. So I definitely recommend checking those out, and it will be just aramızda kalsın. I'm not sure what is the English, sorry about that. Aramızda kalsın. Hala bir para ödemiyoruz Cloudflare'a. So their free tier is so generous that we still up to date don't pay anything to the Cloudflare. 2 weeks ago we had a meeting with Cloudflare and I was like worried, guys, we still don't pay you anything, and they were totally fine with that. Okay, no worries, you will end up paying in a long term. So this is how cloud providers work. So since we are a lab environment, as I mentioned, we are still trying to find a good way to have check-in flows, how we can like work with disruptions in case of your flight is cancelled. We offer a new flight to you so that you can choose your flight through our MCP. And one of the things that I want to mention today is how we are seeing the next big thing. It is MCP apps. It was called MCP UI, but I believe a couple of days ago, I believe on Friday, they had a blog post. Fatih also tweeted that. So MCP UI was a library that was adding support for MCPs to render UIs. And they merged with MCP spec. They are planning to merge with MCP so that we can render UIs through our MCPs. So we are going in a world where we, instead of having fully blown UIs, we will have like partial UIs. You will see our seat map in the conversation flow. How does it work? So I'm pretty sure it is not readable on the back, but how does it work? When you register your tool, you also expose a meta. So you gave an output template to the MCP client that whenever that tool is being used, you can use that metadata to render something. And there is an external link here, if you see that. We show the Turkish Airlines flight.html. We send it to the client, and when that tool is being called by MCP client, it fetches that HTML, and that HTML is being rendered. And what you see is you are seeing your boarding pass on ChatGPT or whatever platform that's going to support those SDKs. So it is a relatively new thing, and ChatGPT will release their App Store at the end of this year. So if you are like me, missed the building first mobile application, building first Android application, building first iOS application. So if you missed all of those, make sure you don't miss that one, because I truly believe that it will be one of the biggest things that we will face in a short term. So what obviously we needed to be there as well. So we build our ChatGPT app, which you can test it out today if you are clever enough to see that URL or watch it through the replay. But anyways, so it will be aramızda again. So it is still on a beta product, but right now this is completely ChatGPT, you can integrate our MCP and see all of the flight options internally. So instead of like writing everything by text, you can now see all of those flight options along with your chat story. And if you are curious if your flight is delayed or if your flight is landed, you can see your flight status there. Or if you are curious if there is a promotion from Turkey to the US, you can see those promotions and hopefully book through that. So those are the sneak peeks of what we are building right now. But if you are not a developer but a UX person, there is a huge potential there, because everyone tries to do that. At first will be, okay, cool, I will do my whole website there and it won't be usable at all. So if you try those, you will immediately see that there is a new UX issue, because you still need to be inside that chat, but those UI is completely interactive. So you can do clicks, you can expand and close stuff. So for example, in that case, I'm not sure if you can see that by clicking there, you can get a detailed view of that flight and so on. So if you are interested in UX, I believe there is a potential there as well. So not only Turkish Airlines MCP, but as Turkish technology, we use MCP for our internal processes as well. So TKGPT, which is like a ChatGPT internally, because we obviously cannot use any cloud providers, and hopefully one cloud provider is coming to Turkey. I hope you guys will be the second.
Yeah, we will be first.
That's the spirit I want. So we are utilizing Atlassian, we are using Confluence and Jira internally, but we are using Confluence and Jira internally, so we are using Atlassian MCPs. We are using on-prem LLMs, which are deployed on our on-prem GPUs. And right now we are also working on how we can book our personal flight tickets internally through MCP. So MCP is a really big buzz internally at Turkish Airlines as well. And one of the topics that I want to mention is we also developed an open source UI library, and we built an MCP that you can use to understand what you can build with that UI library. Because as an airline, we obviously needed a better way to build our UIs. So instead of trying to fork everything and build upon that, we released an open source UI library. Hopefully you can check it out, and you can definitely check it out and contribute to that as well. And we also released a MCP of takeoff UI, and by that MCP you can get component list, you can get component info, you can like integrate with Tailwind and so on. And one of the things that is really clever that our team made is you can directly code from Figma file to the Figma using our predefined prompt. So that's it. If you have any questions, regardless of the language, hopefully in Turkish, because you can ask in English as well, so please.
Thank you.
We have time, right? No?
Yeah, you have time.
Okay.
May I ask, I'm curious about in your mobile application, we
Mm.
can't see any AI integration.
Yeah.
Will we see? Yalnız sormuş olabilir.
You will see shortly. That's all I can tell right now. You will see. You will see. Yes.
In ChatGPT, I mean, yes,
Mhm.
I totally agree with you about, because most of the traffic converts to there. That's why you need to be there. But in the ChatGPT, it must be much more engaged and most specific to the people. How do you design that user experience? For example, I have a new baby, but he
Yeah.
is single, so our flight experiences will be different. How are you going to define that?
That's a good question. I don't know the answer right now. So our UX team is right now working on how we can build like better UIs, because those UIs are coming from our lab. But yeah, those different user perspectives, ChatGPT doesn't expose them to the MCP, so we obviously cannot know those. So probably we will end up having a simple enough user interface there, which help us show our different packages and so on. So I don't have a good answer to that, sir. Yeah.
Yo, I remember the first time that you guys released the TK MCP, the Turkish names.
Yeah.
But like, do you guys have like successful build and user space? Maybe on the interaction. Do you guys, how many users do you guys have?
Right now we don't have a lot of users because obviously none of the. So if we are going to talk MCP other than this room, probably we will see nobody. But once that ChatGPT apps comes to ChatGPT apps comes, I believe everyone will try to build their MCPs because
Kind of an investment, right?
yeah.
Makes sense.
So as I mentioned previously, our team is a lab, so we try new things all of the time, and some of them sticks to the wall, some of them just being forgotten and repository is being deleted.
Makes sense. So like I at the time that I first saw the Turkish technology MCP or Turkish MCP, doesn't matter. I thought that I would use it someday, but like I haven't got any time to use it.
Yeah.
So I actually thought that will I use it in
Yeah,
future?
up to that date, Cloud is the only platform that you can use because ChatGPT introduced MCP support in a weird way. You need to have like some custom tools, and you can use in deep research and so on. So we were waiting ChatGPT to support custom MCPs, but they released ChatGPT apps, which is like obviously MCP with UI. So I believe that will be the point where our MCP is being used mostly.
I was actually waiting for a team to build a custom LLM to just use that MCP server. Like, so maybe it was someday, it'll be someday possible, but like I don't think it's in near future. Frontier companies will do the job for us.
Yeah, probably. So if you have any further questions, or do we still have time or no? Yeah. One last question, and after that, I am happy to. Özkan, where are you? So he's one of the responsibles of Turkish Airlines MCP. You can bother him as well. So, so yeah.
Okay, thank you for this presentation. I wrote it down so that I don't get stuck.
Yeah.
From your most feasible flight example, flight Konya, I guess.
Yeah.
Are you more focused on building the best tools for MCP in hopes that the model uses the correct series of...
Yeah, that's a good question.
Or more focused on the cases that the model will then identify and deterministically trigger a series of tools?
So firstly, deterministic is not an LLM thing.
Yeah, I mean that if
I got you. So we started with the obvious one. One of the first things when we started so one of the first things we implemented while we were building ChatGPT app was flight status, because it's an obvious thing, it is an easy thing to build, it is not a complicated API. So we started with that and added like obvious use cases, because we searching a flight, checking your check-in status, checking your baggage information, checking your mise-en-place information is just obvious things, and we started with those. But in terms of how so defining and this good description for your tool is everything in the MCP world. So Özkan had a good time like changing the descriptions of the tools, and eventually we got a point that right now cloud is like more clever than ChatGPT 5.1, because when we started integrating our MCP to the ChatGPT, it always like confuses if I should search a flight or check for flight status. But cloud is so way ahead of time in terms of tool calling, and probably they will release some new tool when they release their chat.
ChatGPT can use Cloud for MCP.
Why not? To Amazon Bedrock.
Yeah, exactly.
But I would assume that even cloud might have some problems
Yeah, definitely.
identifying what series of tools it has to.
At that point, it comes to your tool definitions. Your tool definitions should be like super clear and explicit enough, and you shouldn't expose a lot of tools, because once you have like tools more than 20 and so on, it gets confused as well.
But I would also assume that, I mean, for the Turkish Airlines, people would have 1 or 2 or maybe 5 or 10 cases that they want to, like for this example, they want to find the most feasible flight. So if there is some deterministic series of tools that you can set beforehand.
So what you can do is you can say in the description of the tool, whenever that tool is being called, prefer this tool afterwards. So LLMs are clever enough to follow that path.
Okay.
So you can do that. All of those questions you can ask.
Okay. Thanks.
Okay. So tekrar teşekkürler. İngilizcem için kusura bakmayın.
David'e devam edeceğiz arkadaşlar. Hemen sadece bilgisayarı değiştireceğiz. Ondan sonra network'ün oturumumuz var.
Let's see. Stuff is off. Great, cool. I'm David. Hello, thank you so much for having me in Istanbul. I'm David. I'm a member of technical staff at Anthropic. I'm also the co-creator of MCP and currently what people would call the BDFL of MCP, which means I get to make the final decisions, and if there's anybody to blame, it's also me. Great. So keep all your complaints for later, and then we can go from there. Okay, where do we start with MCP? A quick overview of like where do we start it, where it's going. A brief overview of like what MCP is, and then I look into like where are we going from here 1 year after the release, which was actually yesterday. So yesterday, a year ago, we released MCP to the world. Not knowing, honestly, what we are doing at the time with it, how big it will become. At the time, it was Justin and my little project on the side that we were lucky enough that we have executive sponsorship at the company to really go out and like open source this in the way we wanted to do it. And I was saying to Justin,
at the time that I believe within a month nobody will talk about this. And yet here we are, a year later, we're still talking about MCP. So things have gone quite well. But why did we do MCP? Initially, at Anthropic, we did MCP out of a few reasons. We had a set of applications, desktop applications, IDEs, but also like early forms of agents. And all of these needed to connect to data sources. That can be, for example, the file system at the time, that can be data sources like Postgres databases and so on. And we were building these over and over and over again, or worst case scenario, we often sometimes just copied things into Cloud Desktop, copied stuff out of Cloud Desktop. And I was thinking there needs to be a better way of connecting these type of things. And so in order to not have to implement the same thing over and over and over again for every of these applications, why not build one abstraction layer as a protocol and being able to speak with all of these integrations directly to all of these applications? And that is what people commonly refer to as an n times n problem. You have n clients, you have m amount of integrations, and you want to connect them. And the right way to do this is usually via a protocol. And so that's how MCP was born, and it was very much inspired at the time by similar solutions in this problem space. For example, the language server protocol, LSP. And so MCP, LSP, these things are very similar if you really, really look under the hood. And I wanted to show you, this was actually the very, very, very first demo that Justin recorded at the time. So this looks quite janky in comparison to modern Cloud AI, but that was Cloud AI a year ago. Just looking into some Postgres database and being able to ask, back at the time, Claude 3.5 about like diagramming the relationships between the database schema. And here we're already making actually use of most of MCP at the time, more than what people do today. It uses both tools as well as resources. And so you were able to show that you can like diagram a database quite nicely in Cloud AI. And that was one of these original ideas that we tried to do, is bring integrations into applications like Cloud Desktop and Cloud AI. Now, of course, today, this is slightly different. Today, we're talking mostly about agents and not just as much about applications. And so in agents, you really have this like, you know, prompt input, some form of an agent, and then some form of a result. And still in agents, if we build more and more agents, we still have this problem of having these different connectors that we require. And this is amplified in the agentic world because agents really want to use a lot of tools in order to connect to different data sources. One of the most common type of agents you're using maybe is something like Claude Code, something like Gemini CLI, or something like that. But besides that, people write more and more workflow automation that, for example, require a form of agentic work to do something. A friend of mine, he has 2 kids that are growing up. He wants to sell a lot of old stuff. So he has automation that uses MCP servers to go take a bunch of pictures. Like he takes a bunch of pictures, he uploads it to his automation, the automation takes it, identifies what the object is, gets a rough price point of the object, and then creates basically an online Facebook, Craigslist type of listing, so he can sell his stuff very simple in all of it, because he has like the opportunity to build these, to connect to like an agent, his data source, which in this case is like the German equivalent of Craigslist with MCP. So basically the whole point is like nowadays it's not just, you know, about these applications that don't scale in terms of integration, but also about agents that don't scale at integrations. And so having one common language here again helps really scale you the integrations up significantly, which will make agents significantly better. And then of course, if you're using agents today, there is a large ecosystem of pre-built MCP servers that you can now use on a day-to-day basis, right? The Turkish MCP, Airlines MCP server is one of these integrations. There's actually a lot of others. In fact, there's roughly 10,000 of these nowadays. And then if you really have more and more of these integrations work together, you're getting more powerful combined workflows where something like a Cloud AI can really make use of these integration, orchestrate across them. So in this example, we are creating a set of tasks from one integration to another, and it does all of this automatically. So this is an early, like, small iteration of an agentic flow where multiple data sources come together to really create these, like, really nice automation workflows that we're seeing more and more that are enabled through something like MCP. And so this is really the main reason why we are building MCPs, to like allow for this large set of integrations to be reusable across a wide variety of applications, agents, and agents, yeah. So, and the whole thing, again, started a year ago. I don't want to like bother you too much with these technicalities, but it's basically a year, and there's a lot of like really big stuff that has happened. We had one of the first big milestones about December or January timeframe last year was the cursor adoption. We had the VS Code adoption in March. And then really in May, June was the really big moment. There was a week where I think Satya, Nadell, Sam Altman, and what's the Google guy called? The Google CEO? Yeah, all three of them, Sundar, posted that they will adopt MCP. It was quite weird to wake up in the morning to Twitter and find yet another billionaire talking about your project, but there we are. And so that was really the takeoff point at which I think MCP gained what I would call escape velocity, where it is so big now and so widely used that it really drives the ecosystem nearly by itself. And then we had in August a lot of help from like people building MCP hosting solutions, and then we can talk about the registry later. But now we are roughly at 10,000 plus maybe 15,000 public servers. If you look at what people have built internally, in addition, we're probably looking, I would say, double the amount. So we're probably looking at 20,000 integration that people have built over a year. Which is quite cool, quite great. We have really big people like coming in, like the Snowflakes, the GitHubs, HubSpot, GitLabs, Google Drive integrations, all of these type of things that work now on MCP. But when we talk about MCP, one of the questions I'm often getting is like, but why don't we just do an API? This sounds like an API to me. And there's a few things why we wouldn't do this and why this works so well, why MCP is different. The first one is that while like something like RESTs and GraphQL are like somewhat standardized, they're not standardizing the full aspect of the integration, and particularly they don't standardize how to do authorization, they don't standardize how you do the specific description of tools and like other metadata that you would want to require in AIs. The second part, they're often not really documented, and you would have to, in the case of open API specs, you would have to integrate like sometimes up to 4 really large documents that are somewhat not very well documented in order to use these type of tools. And MCP really tries to make this set much, much smaller by like forcing you to basically write fewer tools that are very well documented. And third, if you use a standard REST API, usually you have 20, 30, 50, 100 endpoints. If you look at something complicated like the GitHub API, it can be many hundreds. And that when you provide those to a modern LLM, it would confuse the model quite a lot. Because if you have an API endpoint that says search by name, search by ID, those are two separate endpoints in a REST API. If you give this to a model, the model would not know, is this an ID or is this a name? And it gets very easily confused. And so really making sure we have something that is specialized for LLMs, that is auto-discoverable, that is describing itself, was very important to make this really work well with models. Okay. Cool. Let me very quickly give you a very brief overview about like, now that we have hopefully established, I do not want this. I do not want to call someone. Get out. Good. Have we successfully broken the presentation? Good. turning it off and on again. So I'll briefly give you an overview of what MCP is, because the other part is that MCP is more than just tool calling, what most people associate with MCP. And so a lot of these questions come from like, why is this not an API? Why is this MCP? Come from this confusion that MCP is way more than pure tool calling. And so I just want to briefly go over these primitives now that we have established why would we want something like an MCP. So there's a few things that we expose. There's a client on here on the left side, which we have 3 things that clients can do. They can provide sampling, roots, and elicitation support. And then the server can provide 3 things: tools, resources, and prompts. And now that we are here, most people only talk about tools. So we already like, MCP is way more than just tools. Some of it might not be very useful to you, but it exists. So what is there? Of course, tools exist as functions that you can provide for a model to take actions. So this can be like book a flight, search something, read a GitHub issue, these type of things. Read Slack. There are the common things that you see for the most part models use. They're very powerful. They feel a little bit like magic to people because the model automatically runs these type of things. So they're really the most backbone of MCP's interaction model by allowing you to provide functionality to a model. Second are resources. Resources are a bit different. Resources are supposed to be, for the most part, files, schemas, things that you can provide to the application that uses the model directly or to the model directly. And this can, traditionally it was mostly files. But this is actually not very widely used at the moment. But interestingly enough, it is the way and the mechanism that you require to deliver MCP applications, so the ChatGPT applications, they are coming via resources. So those are basically just like a big blob of text that you can provide to the model directly, and then the application using the model is able to either put this into the application, into the model context, or use it in a different way. Again, most clients today don't support this, but we will see a big use case of this when we talk about MCP applications, which is coming soon. Lastly, we had something called prompts. I don't want to talk much about it. It's barely supported anywhere. This was something we used very early. These are basically templates that you can use for users to enter directly into the context window, so you don't have to write them yourself. It's barely used, but it's quite neat, and at the time it was a useful idea, less so today. There's 2 things that I do want to talk about because they are interesting. The first one is sampling. This is a thing that MCP supports and some MCP clients support, where you can ask where the server itself, so you write an MCP server, for example, an MCP server that wants to read a Slack channel and summarize the Slack channel and then give it to you already summarized. Now, during the summarization, you probably want to use an LLM. So you have 2 options. You can either bring your own SDK and your own API key to use the model you want to use, or you can use the model that the client, so for example, Claude AI or VS Code, is already configured and to use. And that's what sampling is doing. Sampling is nothing but to say, I, as an MCP server, want to go and request basically an LLM completion from the client and use that back by myself. This is super powerful, very, very useful, quite complicated to get your head around. But when clients support this, like VS Code, it's quite an interesting idea for you to write an MCP server that makes use of LLMs without actually having to provide your own API key, without actually having to provide your own SDK integration. I don't want to talk about roots. I do want to talk about elicitations. And then lastly, and maybe besides tools, the second most important feature in MCP is something called elicitation. What an elicitation does, it's a mechanism when for example, you are, let's take Turkish Airlines again, because we just saw the MCP server. If you want to, for example, provide a mechanism to say, book a flight, and I want you to confirm that you as the user really want to book that flight for the given price. Now what I need to do is I need to make sure as the MCP author, a server author, that you as the user will be asked this question, do you confirm? Now the problem is when there's an LLM, the LLM calls the tool and says book the flight, right? But now how do I make sure the user gets asked? Some applications will ask the user, should I call this tool? Some will not. So elicitations is a way to ask the user on the other side for more information. And so it forces the application, like Claude AI, to say, display to you, do you want to book this flight? And then you click OK. So it's a way for additional information asked from the user where a human needs to interact with it. And that's the important part. And that is very important if you during a tool call, you want more information, you can ask for more. It can also be like, oh, what's your passport number, right? And you want the user to enter it rather than the LLM to provide it. You can use an elicitation for this because it asks the user instead of letting the model answer it for you. So those are the building blocks. And so MCP is already way more than just tool calling. Tool calling and elicitation is something very, very important to really build much richer interfaces for LLMs. And then tool calling, elicitations, and resources are really what later enables something like MCP apps, which I will talk about. Okay, I don't want to talk about like when do you want, okay, but maybe briefly when do you want to talk build an MCP server, but I think we just saw a very good explanation of this. You want to build an MCP server in two case scenarios. Either you have a product that you really want to expose to people that feel will interact with it via chat application, and your main value proposition is not the interface, but actually just the service itself. Like again, Turkish Airlines is a good example. You make money by selling the flight, not by providing the website, right? And so there are similar aspects like this. Shopify, for example, uses MCPs in all their shops. You can use them via MCP servers. Why? Because in the end of the day, what I'm interested in is buying the thing, not providing the website necessarily. And so that's a great use case for writing an MCP server that for your company that is externally available to users. But where it's even more important, where we see most of the MCP adoption today is in big companies to give people access to internal data sources. And that's what we also saw in the previous presentation, where you have one internal chat interface and then all the data connectors like Jira, Confluence, and others that really allow people inside the company to be just way, way, way more effective and way more, and being able to access their data and from within the company. For example, in the morning, I use the Slack, like our internal Slack MCP server to just tell me everything that happened in the channels I care about and summarize it for me. And that's my use case where I use a very internal server, and I actually use very little external servers because I mostly use it for work. So those are the two different scenarios where you really want to build an MCP server. And I do really believe that this internal use case is actually more important than the external one. Okay. What is this? I don't even know what this is. Cool. The next, so that's where we are today with MCP. So we have the base protocol that currently enables these 10,000, 20,000 integrations worldwide. Most of them are built around tools, some of them starting to use things like elicitations. We have a large set of clients being able to use it today. But what's coming up in the next, like what's the next thing we want to do? There's a few steps. The first one was actually yesterday. We released a new version of the specification that enabled a few interesting use cases. There's a lot of just like homework that we need to do, changes to authorization, things to improve user experience. But then there are 2 or 3 really big pieces that we want to make sure fall in place. And these 3 pieces are, our 4 pieces in this case actually. We want to enable more agentic flows. So we often have these questions around like, how do I have an MCP server expose an agent that is very long running, that might take like a day to complete, it takes 20 minutes to complete. And that's something we want to build. We want to look into how to provide richer interfaces, because currently all the interactions people have with MCP servers is pure text-based. And while text-based is great for agent and it's nice and for humans as well, it's actually not how we as humans naturally think. We are very visual. We look at things, we want to see something. When I want to reserve an airline flight, I want to see a seat selection, and I don't want to do this in text, right? Because I do not know what 39F means to anybody. I do not know where this is in a plane. So we want to enable richer interfaces. We want to think more about discovery, because at the moment, the way you discover an MCP server is very painful. You need to know the URL, you need to configure it, you need to enable it. If you think about it from a product perspective, how MCP servers work in most applications today, it's actually quite painful and not very seamless. And we want to provide the mechanisms to really make it significantly more seamless, so that these powerful AI models can automatically discover what you want to use. Because it is actually, if you really think about it, today in Cloud AI you have to select the MCP server you want to use before you start the conversation. But at the same time, you're using these powerful models. They should figure this out for me, right? Why do I need to figure it out, right? So I think that's things we want to make better. And then last but not least, we have very big hyperscalers very much being all in on MCP, that be Google, Microsoft, and Amazon, and others. And these will have struggles with some of the current mechanisms of how the transport mechanism in MCP works, in scaling MCP servers significantly up. And so there's a lot of work that we need to do to make MCP easier to scale, and part of it is something we will call the stateless transport mechanisms. So those are the big focus points over the next few months and years to come. Because I want to live in a world where in a year from now, you can just seamlessly interact with something like Cloud AI, and it will just know the right MCP server. You don't even know that it's MCP. It should just work. You want to book a flight, you should be able to book a flight, and the model should be able to give you the cheapest flight. You want to, move a Jira ticket around to, Asana. It should just work. All you need to do is log in with the accounts, and everything else should be taken care of. And that's the kind of world I want to live in, and that's what we're working towards. Okay, but let's go into a little bit of the specifics of what we currently do now. And actually, is the newest thing that we added to MCP yesterday, which is called tasks. So one of the problems we're having is that currently, if you run a tool, you need to wait for the tool call to be done. So if you talk to a model, you would wait. Now this is good for most cases, but there are some use cases, particularly around agentic workflows, deep research. So do some research operation for me. Look at this research database, read all the papers, summarize them, come back to me with a result. This can take 20 minutes, 30 minutes, 40 minutes, right? Some operations might take days, right? How do you deal with this? This is what tasks is for. So tasks are a mechanism for an MCP client to start a long-running operations on the server and ask for updates frequently. Every 20 minutes you can say, is this task completed? Is this task completed? And your MCP server eventually will tell you when this long operation is done. This is today in the protocol. No client implements it, but we will see in the next 2-3 months support for this everywhere, which is why I cannot show you a good example of this. but we will see this everywhere, where people will be able to write much richer interfaces in MCP because they can now do these very long operations and get very creative with how much you can do in the model on the server side. Again, agentic workflows are one part of this. Second part are like deep research. But there's a third part to that, is that tasks have a lot of overlap with existing protocols like A2A and ACP, because really if you think about agentic communication, all it does is you have an agent on one side, an agent on the other, and they need to communicate and say, I want to run something long, give me a result back, and vice versa. I want to run something long and give me a result back. So I think task is a mechanism for MCP to really enable agentic communication, which then begs the question why these other protocols, and that's a question I cannot answer, but others will be able to answer, because I believe they're not needed anymore. Simple as that. Because if you take, again, an MCP client and an MCP server, put it into the same application, you put an MCP client and an MCP server in the same application, you suddenly have symmetric communication that is basically like A2A, very similar. And I think with task, you can do a lot of that today. And then, of course, second to that is the second model besides pure agent-to-agent communication. I believe the model that will be more prevalent is few generalized clients like ChatGPT, Claude AI, Gemini Pro that will use long-running agents and orchestrate across them in meaningful ways. And I think that will be the actual model. And I do believe that pure agent-to-agent communication will be less important for the next year at least. Okay, so that's the interesting stuff. So we will see these like very long-running tasks where people will write MCP servers that are way different than what we see today. And I'm really interested to see the developers like figure out what you can do with it. I have my ideas, but I have been surprised every time by the creativity that people do with these type of things to be put into the protocol. The next thing is very boring. So who here wants to talk about authorization MCP? Okay, great, one person. Then we can skip it for the most part. But basically, authorization is one of the most important parts to MCP. It is one of the most difficult parts to MCP because we are leaning on OAuth, and OAuth is very difficult. But as part of OAuth, one thing we are trying, and I think one thing people don't realize about MCP, MCP is really the first attempt ever to build a complete seamless plug-and-play mechanism between two components with authorization in between in the web. If you really think about it, everything that when you use OAuth today, you know the client already knows the server in advance because you register, you get a client ID, and that's the client ID you use. But that is not true for MCP. In MCP, I can take any client and connect it to any server. And so part of the problem here is OAuth is not perfect for this. And we used a mechanism called, and now we're getting very technical, we used a mechanism called dynamic client registration. At the time when we started using it, we asked the authors of OAuth, should we use it? And they said, it sucks, but yes, because there's no better alternative. It's terrible, but you must use it. So we did use it, and now we're improving it by actually changing OAuth itself, by adding a new mechanism to OAuth that's called client ID metadata, which makes a lot of this dynamic client registration stuff go away. And if you ever have to worry about OAuth and MCP, it makes a lot of things way easier. I don't go into the details, you can read all of it up, but that's it. So this is what this specification currently does. What we currently see now is enabling agent-to-agent communication, enabling long-running operations via tasks. We also do sweet little things that are nice for developers. We're adding icons, so you can have tools with icons, and the client can display icons. We have servers with icons. We can have more descriptions about servers. And then we have a lot of small improvements that you can read up to. that I don't want to bother you with. But where does this lead us? So we will have long-running operation. We still want to go and build a better transport. We still need to go and figure out what's the next iteration for agent and for us as humans dealing with agents. And here is where MCP apps comes into play, and the previous presentation talked about this a little bit, but I want to go into a little bit more detail. So there was this thing called MCP UI, which was this idea that you can deliver, again, and I explained what was previously explained, but was this idea that you can basically deliver interfaces via MCP to a chat application. What can this do? This can do all these rich things like seat selection, and for airlines it can show you a product launch overview in an application here. These type of things. OpenAI took this idea and improved upon it quite a bit. They made it easier to use. They made some smart decisions around security and really improved the core idea to something that you can use in products. But we don't want to have this in an MCP. The idea is to write an MCP server once and use it everywhere. And what we don't want is a system that only works in ChatGPT and nowhere else. So we're working now together with the people at OpenAI. We work together with the people at MCP UI to make this an official extension to MCP so that more clients like Claude AI, VS Code, and others will support this in the future so that you can have these rich interfaces. Because I really believe that if you as a human interact with an agent or with like some form of data source, you not only want to always read text, you want to have things that are visual to you in certain scenarios, because we as humans, we fundamentally think very visual. And something like a product launch overview, I can instantly tell within 2 seconds, not even 2 seconds, 1 second of looking at it, I know where the problem is, here and here. But if I see this in text, in a chat application, I have no clue. I would need to read a lot, and it would be it would be way less nice for me to use. And similar, you might even have things like confirmation dialogues that you really, really care about. Other things that you can think about MCP UI enabling or MCP apps enabling is, for example, shopping. If you want to do shopping via an application like Claude AI, I use Claude AI all the time to give me ideas around which product between two products is better. But I also want to probably see it, and I probably want to even buy in the application. I don't want to go somewhere else. And so one of these things MCP apps will enable in the future is interfaces where I can then go and check out directly in one of these applications. And so that's, I think, one of the biggest things we will see next year is more and more of these applications that then will work across a wide variety of interfaces, ChatGPT, Claude AI, and others. The second part that I'm quite excited about in the future is that we're going to see better MCP clients. So I think this year was for most people around experimenting. What can you do with writing agents? What can you do with writing chat applications? What can you do with adding integrations? One thing people don't remember, an agent like Claude Code, agentic systems like Claude Code or Gemini CLI, they have been around for less than a year. So this field is rapidly evolving. And so we have just seen 11, 10 months of people experimenting with this. And now we're seeing a lot of the problems. And so in the MCP world, a lot of the problems come from MCPs lead to a lot of tools. So if you are in Claude AI and you enable 3 MCP servers, you will have so many tools that the tools itself will take up a vast majority of the context window. And that leads to you having less ability to use the context, but also everyone knows context windows degrade after the longer they become. And so this is what we call like context bloat, and that's a very big problem, particularly for people that use MCP servers a lot. And so I'm very interested in seeing how we can do better. And I'm very excited that we just launched yesterday or on Monday, 3 new tools from Claude AI, our developer platform, to help client builders do this. Now I do want to preface, this is proprietary APIs that exist only on Claude AI. They do not exist somewhere else, but the principles behind it, they can be applied everywhere. And the first thing is using tool search to write better MCP clients. So instead of loading all the tools directly and having 50 tools in the context window, instead you have one tool and that tool searches for tools. And when the tool is being called by the LLM, you go do the search, you return new tools, and then those tools are actually added to the context window. This is surprising that most people don't do this because it's basically just RAG, like retrieval augmented generation, applied to tools. And it's very obvious to me that that's what you should do, but people don't do it. The second part is a very interesting aspect that we talked recently a lot about, both around MCP, but also we have now an interface to this that is proprietary, that you can use very easily. It's called programmatic tool calling. The idea being, if I want to, and I think I have an example here, if I want to, for example, read a GitHub issue and then get for every issue the GitHub, like more details, like about an author, for example. This is all pseudocode, it doesn't work, but anyway. An author, right? In traditional tool calling, I would have to do a tool call, then the LLM would take over, do another tool call, do another tool call, do another tool call, do another tool call. But if instead what I can do with programmatic stuff is have the model generate code for me that does all of this in one go, super efficient, because it does not need the result of GitHub issues. It only needs it temporarily. I don't need the result in my context. So instead, it generates this code, and then this code gets executed, and only the result gets into the context window. So we basically allow the model to combine the tools with as a program in such a way how we would naturally do this as software engineers, and significantly reduce the amount of context being used and improve significantly the conciseness of the context window as a result. So this is what we call programmatic tool use. You can implement it yourself, but we give you in our Claude AI API an interesting way to just do that by yourself. You can just give it a bunch of tools, mark them as callable, and then it will just do all of it for you. And then lastly, in tool use, there's a small little problem in the that if you have certain parameters, it's not quite clear how you use them unless you put it into the tool description. So for example, there are things like date formats. It's not quite clear to the model what the specific format for a date is. So you can provide examples of how to use the tool. So those 3 things are things that I think you can do in every MCP client if you want to. But if these are proprietary features that exist in Claude AI API that you can use to build better MCP clients using Claude, of course. Okay, so what else is there? So we have now tasks, there's the long-running stuff, we have our MCP apps. There's one more aspect that I want to talk about is the registry, because this goes into this problem of discoverability. And this is this problem that if I currently want to use the MCP server from Turkish Airlines, I need to go to find the URL, put it in, authenticate myself. And it's actually a workflow that is very much for developers and not for users. Users do not want to deal with custom manage my connectors interface. It's horrible. So what we want to build is a set of central registry for MCP servers. So this works as follows. We have a central public registry where everyone can submit their MCP server. Now that's a bad idea because nobody tells you what is a good server and what is a bad server. But it is very much a place where everybody can submit one. And that is very similar to NPM, packages, PyPy, these type of things. But then on top of that, what you can do, we're going to allow a set of sub-registries. So people can have their private registry where they curate what they want to show to their users, and basically take this list and filter it and only provide those to users. And now what you have, you can give those to clients, and now those clients can do automatic discovery. Because what they can do, which one is the right slide? Is this the right slide? Roughly. What you then can do, you can write an agent that reads, that takes the question from the user, go to the registry and ask the registry, do you have an MCP server for this? Install the MCP server, and then go and ask the user to log in and continue the task from there. And that's really what we want to enable, which is this what like basically tool and server discovery. And if you have a central place to look at, you can do this. If you have a central trusted sub-registry that you can look at, it's even better. You probably do not want to automatically install servers from the public registry. You probably want some filtered registry that either you do yourself or something like Anthropic or OpenAI might provide to you. And so that's one of these aspects. And so then we have these automatic discovery mechanisms where the agent should automatically discover it. And we're getting closer to what matters to the user, because to the user only one thing matters: get my shit done. That's all the user cares. That's everything the user wants is start a task, finish the task. I don't care what happens. I don't want to hear about MCP as a user. The developer should know about MCP. The user should never see it, right? It should just work. And so this is the idea again here, agentic MCP discovery using the registry API. You can go to the API, ask for an MCP server, find the right server, install it, and then be done. And for that, we have the MCP registry. The official MCP registry is currently in like a previous state, but it will be stable very soon. And you can find this, I think, under registry.modelcontextprotocol.io, something like that. You will find it on the GitHub. But this exists already, and you can already submit servers today, and you can already build sub-registries with it. And then lastly, one thing I'm very, very excited about, and if you pay very careful attention, you will see where this goes. We will have something called web discovery. So at the moment, again, it is very difficult to find the right MCP servers. And what you will see is that browsers increasingly build AI into their browsers, be that Chrome, be it specialized browsers like the ChatGPT's or like OpenAI's Atlas browser, and other browsers increasingly have these basically AI-enabled browsers. But the interesting part there is, if I go to a website like Turkish Airlines, how do I know that they provide me like an MCP server? Well, the idea is, we can tell you. We will build a standard that says, if you go to example.com, also check well-known MCP server.json. And if this file is there, then there will be an MCP server, and you will know everything about the MCP server. And now I can instantly have the AI application inside the browser use the MCP server. And you don't need to know as a user that there is an MCP server. All you did is you went to turkishairlines.com, and suddenly you can use the MCP server, right? That's where we want to be. This is something we are currently working on. This is a collaboration between me and OpenAI to put this into the specification for MCP. And in 6 months, hopefully, you will be able to use this. So while you're making photos, just note this is an idea that does not exist yet, but it's something we want to get to, right? So this is roughly where MCP is heading. What I'm currently seeing is we have established a massive ecosystem. We have established the need for an open integration protocol like MCP. But what we are missing is widely used primitives for long-running tasks to enable richer agentic systems and agentic communication. We want to also enable richer interfaces for users so that we go away from pure text to something that humans really, really like to use on a day-to-day basis. And then lastly, We need to get into the business of making something like MCP, remove them for the users, make it purely for developers, and the users should, for the users, it should just work. And then the users just want to put a task in and get a result out, and we want to do this via the registry and web discovery as part of solving this, as well as providing things like tool search and programmatic MCP use in order to enable much, much better MCP clients. And so what do I hope for the next 6 months is that people just build these things better and that the product itself gets better. I think the protocol is nearly there. What needs to be done is a lot of product work. And for that, I think there's a lot of opportunity in the space to build products that are significantly better than what we see today. Cool. And that's it. I hope I didn't lose everybody because of my English. So let me know if there are any questions, if you want to.
Lütfen kısa ve soru soralım ki çok fazla soru var. Şuradan başlayarak.
So already,
Networking ortamına devam ederiz.
already done to just like remember it. So I'm reading now. So my question is related to the public registry. First of all, it seems that basically any malicious actor write a malicious MCP server and like exploit any operation that is provided via proxy. So which raises a question in my mind that would there be any static code analyzer or something just to be the first line of defense?
Okay. So the question, in my understanding, is if you have an open registry, you open the door to any type of injection attacks, general like.
It's basically a new vector to just attack.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. So just the same way to attack something. The answer is there are two ways to do this. To do registries, you can do the open approach, which is similar to a package management system, which is what we do with the official one. So for that, we cannot do much. It is basically the same problem as a package management system. So the same supply chain attacks you will see on NPM, on PyPy, you will see that as well there. What we hope is that there will be two things that help. Sub-registries with people who curate them and then look at the code. And second is we have a lot of ideas of like having server authors to provide at least a tool description in advance, and we can classify them, and then the client can check, does the tool description match? Only then I trust the server. But I cannot trust the code because it's just code. So that's a fundamental problem we will have, and we cannot solve because it's a same registry as a package management system.
That actually makes sense. Thank you.
Yeah.
Actually, I had a similar question. So, for example, if we develop a mobile application with something to store, it goes through some checks, including security checks.
Yeah.
But now this is a public registry, and anyone can post to the same MCP server multiple times. In this case, is there a roadmap, like putting some guardrails, saying consumers that okay, if these items are checked, you can trust the same server?
I think the way this is going to work again, I think the public registry will have that problem, but you will see sub-registries. Like, for example, a company like Anthropic might provide you a registry that it has curated, or OpenAI might do that. I'm not talking about products that we will or will not do, but that's how I think it will work. And then you will go and use our registry, and that you can be safe because we have checked it. We might enforce the normal curation like an app store. And that's effectively actually what we do today. So Cloud AI has an MCP directory, and that's curated. And that is checked in advance, and you need to submit source code in order to do it. I think you will see that.
Thank you very much.
But the public one, the official one, you should not automatically load MCP servers from it. Don't do that. It's a package management system. Don't trust it.
Hi. Thank you for coming. You have mentioned RAG for MCP tools. I have also played with this idea on my own because I was doing it locally.
Yeah.
And I have like RTX 3060 with 12 GB of RAM, VRAM. So I will have really small context window to utilize anything. And I have experienced that if I set my tool naming clean enough, that even small model can figure what I want to do.
Yes.
Even with a smaller context
Yes.
model. Do you guys at Anthropic have a plan on utilizing smaller models instead of building larger models? And do you have any insight on the future of these small language models?
As a general principle, I do not talk about our product. I will not talk about models or future models. I will talk happily about every model we currently have, our public, which you should all use, but I will not talk about small models that might or might not come. I do think you're right. So I think these small models can be very useful, can be for specific tasks. Like I'm running some small models myself. Like Quen models are very common and so people run. I find them for very, very, very specific tasks good enough, but I very quickly reach the limit. And so yeah, for small tasks it can be good. For LLMs, I'm very skeptical. I think for image generation it's perfectly fine. For other things it's perfectly fine. For LLMs, again, it needs to be so narrow that it works. I tried to get tool calling working with GPT OSS. I just couldn't make it work very well. It's just, the model is just too bad. And the problem is tool calling is very hard. And you can even tell the difference between the frontier models, right? We talked about it before. I think Claude is probably one of the best ones in terms of tool calling. And these are very hard, and it's very hard to do this right. But you're right, a good tool description is the most important part, the single most important part.
They require some other 100 billions just to do the tool.
Yes, exactly. It's a lot of money that you spent on tool calling.
Yesterday, Ilya was on a podcast, the workers' parçası, is very famous. And he said that we are moving from scaling up models because we reached some kind of plateau for the models, more data, more compute. We are moving to area of research methodology. So everybody is going to compete. So you are at the heart of the AI research. What does moving from age of scaling to the age of research, and how can we adapt? Is it possible?
Yeah, it's a good question. I do not...
If you don't mind, I want to repeat in Turkish.
Yeah, go for it.
Okay, arkadaşlar, dün İlya, LLM'i icat eden kişi, Demiş Patel'in podcast'indeydi. Dediği şey şu, bütün modeller artık istediğiniz kadar işte AWS'ye koyun, oraya buraya koyun, bir platoya ulaştı bir model. Artık istediğiniz kadar şey yapın, ilerleyemiyoruz, tıkandık. Bundan sonra ne yapmamız lazım? Research. Tekrar daha fazla research, daha yeni modeller bulmamız lazım. Bu kadar çok, zaten hızlı, çok değişen bir şeyde bizler nasıl adapte olabileceğiz? Böyle bir soru. Teşekkür ederim.
Yeah, so it's a good question. I do not know the answer. The answer is I have yet to see the type of limit he's talking about. I think I can see where he's coming from. I do not have yet an opinion of what does this mean. But what I see at the moment is that we still see quite big improvements with the current methodologies. I think the jump from Opus 4 to Opus 4.5 is a good evidence of that, that the current methodology scales. All methodologies have scaling limits, probably. When that is, I do not know, because I'm not Dario. Yeah, it's a good question. I have to think more about it. I don't know a good answer.
Yeah. I have asked one question about the MCP apps and the MCP UI. Do you provide a native SDK for mobile apps to just render the MCP UI, or we should render HTML on the mobile?
You should probably render HTML on the mobile side. I do not know yet. You mean for mobile applications in particular?
Yeah, on mobile.
Yeah, I do not know. I think, it's a good question. I think you're supposed to render HTML at the moment because what you're getting of an MCP application is effectively HTML that you're supposed to render. So you want to embed some form of web view that you can render it, because what MCP apps is effectively is giving you raw HTML over an MCP resource that you need to embed in an iframe or like some form of safety mechanisms, and that's what you want to render. And so unless you find a good mechanism, I think you will have to just be able to render HTML.
So do you have a plan to support it in the future, or you want to just continue with HTML?
For now, I would say we start with HTML. We would see how it goes. If it's very popular, I think you can totally see a world where maybe some other markup language will be provided that then you can translate into a native code. But I do think it's tricky in a way because of the way mobile native applications work versus like that part is coming from a server. And so I do think I would have to think really carefully over it, like what do I need to do in terms of constraints to make it work. We're using HTML deliberately, for example, at the moment, because it's a very well understood way to display things that mostly work everywhere. But I don't see yet just a path of how we would do something native in mobile.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for your presentation. You know, we already have RPC, and RPC enables us to call remote servers.
Yeah.
What key limitation of RPC made you to develop MCP?
Of RPC, so MCP is using RPC, right? So we have a remote procedure call. Well, everything RPC is just like is a mechanism to like tell me that you need to call something on the other side. And MCP is using JSON RPC, which as the underlying data format. So we're doing RPC. The difference between pure RPC and MCP, and it's also the difference between something like a REST API and MCP, is MCP is very clear about that you must have certain endpoints and the semantics of these endpoints. It says you must call an RPC endpoint called tools list in order to obtain the list of tools. So MCP is more a description of the semantics on top of RPC than an RPC mechanism itself, if that makes sense. So it is really about the semantics and what the behavior should be, describing the behavior, rather than the pure RPC mechanism. That makes sense? Yeah.
Hi.
Yes.
So I'm a current student, and my question is more regarding the industry than MCP
Yeah.
specific. Is that fine?
Of course, if I can answer.
So I'm sure you're aware that there are speculations of an upcoming bubble, especially in this area with Michael Burry and NVIDIA disputing over this. The Wall Street Journal is still denying it. I was wondering if you have any opinions on the upcoming bubble and what is to be expected of it.
I have too little information about finance and too little understanding of the industry. You would be surprised how bad I am dealing with finances, so I'm probably the wrong person to ask. I do think that there's an unprecedented amount of money going from VCs into the industry that I have in 25 years in the industry not seen. That's all I can say, but I do not know about the bubble stuff because I'm not a CEO and don't have enough insights at the moment to really understand if this is a bubble or if this is true. What I do see is that I do think AI will transform a lot of things, and so I think some of the value that is captured is definitely real value, because I do feel there will be a big transition, a big transformation coming in the workforce based on AI. If that's the same value that is currently in the industry, I do not know. So I do not know if there is a bubble or not.
Thanks so much.
Yeah.
Hi. First of all, thanks a lot for the amazing presentation. I want to ask, you mentioned tool search and programmatic tool calling, which are available in the cloud APIs, I presume. Do you guys plan on extending the protocol to include these natively in the MCP?
So, good question. The programmatic tool calling, I think, does not need to be in the protocol. There's enough information in the protocol to make it work. So we added something called structured output to tools in April, June, something like that. this year. And the reason is we did this is because we know that you need this for programmatic tool calling. And I think you can just write a client that currently uses MCP, the current specification, just do a programmatic tool calling with it. And I think you will be good enough. And I'm happy to add more information to tools to make it better. But I think that's purely a client-side implementation detail and not something that the protocol needs. Now, search is a whole different problem, and there's a lot of discussion. The approach to a protocol design, in my mind, is to keep it as minimal as possible. And MCP is already quite big as a protocol, and there's a lot in it. And we want to make sure all the clients really support everything. And so we want to move a little bit slower in terms of features. And I think you only need something like a search inside the protocol if you have so many tools on the server side that you cannot transfer the tool list efficiently over. But luckily, modern broadband is fast and text compresses really well. So I think until we reach that, you would have to have probably like 20,000 tools on the server side for it to need some form of server-side filtering. And until we hit that limit, I think it is better to just do it on the client side because the client has more information and the client knows the situation in which it is better than the server because the client has the full information. What is the application? Am I an agent? What's the best search strategy for me? So for example, for agents, the search strategy might be create 20 sub-agents and select the best one. But for a client in VS Code, it might be better to do something like RAG or something like that. So I do think this is mostly a client problem for now. But if the need arises, maybe in a year from now we will see filtering in the protocol. But I honestly, at the moment, I'm pretty much against it. That's the TLDR. I think it's not needed at the moment.
Son bir soru alacağız şuradan. Sonra kapatalım arkadaşlar. Sonra sorabilirsiniz.
What do you think about world models? Because we can't say I'm not interested in LLMs anymore, so I want to make research and I will leave.
Yeah.
So I just wonder, what do you think?
I do not. I'm sorry about all these research questions where I'm basically saying I do not know enough. I know that Jan is a very smart person, and Jan LeCun is a very smart person, and I would assume that there's something to him, what he thinks, but it's yet to be seen. I think I'm a very pragmatic person. I think currently LLMs solve a lot of problems people have, and they add a lot of value. And I don't even know if it's necessary to not use LLMs and how long it will take to make something like that work under the assumption that it works. So I think it's highly speculative. So the answer is I do not know. I think LLMs work great for my problems, so that's why I care about. I think that's the TLDR. Yeah. Sorry.
Thank you. Before you, by the way, we will have a photo. Just stay, and we have another little surprise for you.
Thank you. That's cool. That's cool stuff. I supposed to blow it out?
Yeah, make a toast.
Should I blow it or what should I do?
Yeah,
toast, a toast?
Yeah, a toast and then blow it.
Well, thank you everybody first and foremost to have me in Istanbul. It's such a lovely city, my first time here. I'm super happy that I missed the birthday party for MCP at the Anthropic office, but I'm very, very happy to celebrate it with all of you. It's a big pleasure. Thank you so much. Anybody wants cake? Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, thank you, David, for being with us today and you accepted our invitation. Arkadaşlar çok teşekkürler size geldiğiniz için. Şimdi efendim fotoğraf alacağız, o yüzden bir daha almayın. Herkese çok teşekkürler. Gerçekten biraz arkada ayakta kaldı arkadaşlar. Genelde biraz overlook ediyoruz her etkinlikte ama orada herkes geldi. Çok teşekkürler o yüzden de.
Yapabiliyorsan sorun değil.
Evet. One last photo.